What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this episode of Home Built Workshop. Today, we're going to take a look at a new tool that I've been seeing all over the place lately. And really, this tool looks super promising, and the capabilities, well, they look pretty awesome as well. So what is this new tool? This is the Xlaserlab X1 Pro Laser Welder. I'm Jeff, you're watching Home Built Workshop. Make sure you stick around because coming up in this episode, we're gonna get this machine set up, we're gonna figure out how to use it, we're gonna put it through its paces. Oh, and also, laser beams. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this episode of Home Built Workshop. I hope all of you are doing awesome. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I like to do a wide variety of projects. I like to get my hands into all different sorts of things. And having the right tool to complete those projects is pretty important. Also, since I'm in such a small space, having a tool that can perform more than one task is pretty important because it helps to save on that space. And that's exactly why I'm excited to try out this Xlaserlab's X1 Pro Laser Welder. Now, in full disclosure, Xlaserlabs did send me this unit to test out. They claim that this machine, all-in-one unit, can cut metal, weld metal, and clean metal. We're gonna find out. We're gonna put this machine through its paces, find out what it can do, how it operates. Let's get started by first taking a look at what's included in this Ultimate Pack kit. What you see here on the table is what's included in the kit, starting out with the laser machine itself, with the cord and the laser welding gun. We've got a power cable. This connects to the machine and is going to plug into the wall. We have a safety clip, laser goggles. We have some focusing lenses as well as some protective lenses. We've got a pack of nozzles here. We're going to go through those a little bit later. Ignition keys. Not really, these are the interlock keys here. You got to have those in for the machine to operate. We have the wire feeder itself. This operates not quite like a MIG, but it does use wire like a MIG welder does. So we have the feeder for that, as well as all of the cables, connections, and everything to attach the wire feed to our welding gun. This is kind of cool because there's a little test coupon here, which is used for testing our exact machine. Kind of shows that it works. That's pretty cool. And we also have an external safety stop. This too will get connected to this machine. Also included here is the laser welding helmet. This is very similar to the goggles. I believe it's a different wavelength. At least that's my assumption than a normal welding helmet. Maybe it's the same. I don't really know, but till I know, we're going to use this one instead of the regular welding helmet. And I also have, not here on the table, is a section of gas tubing used to connect your gas bottle to the welder. I was happy to see this was included because I had read in some forums that maybe it's in earlier models or something that the gas tube was not included, and people were having a hard time finding a 6mm metric gas tube. So I was really excited to see that. We'll get to that here shortly once we start connecting everything, which we're about ready to start doing. During the setup process, I'm basically just going to be working down through the instruction manual as far as setting everything up. This whole machine is brand new to me, so I'm really kind of learning it along with you, but I'm really excited to be able to see what this thing can do. So let's start getting things plugged in. I think we'll start off with probably the most important connection, and that's going to be power. This is a nice heavy-duty power cable. It has one of these all-metal style connectors, just screws into the back of the unit. This is designed for use with a 20 amp circuit, so just heads up on that. You got to have the right sort of plugs to be able to plug this in. Real easy to install, just plugs right into the back. There's a little protective cover over the plug that it goes into. We're just going to unscrew that. Make sure our plug is in all the way. Screw that in. Power cable connected. Since we're plugging things into the back of the machine, let's go ahead and connect this external e-stop. This also has a nice long cable. Has sort of a DB25 style connector on there. Really long magnetic base, which is kind of cool. Maybe that means we can I don't know, magnet that to something. This plugs into the DB25 port on the back of the machine. It is my understanding that you can also do other things through this DB25 port. Connect external switches, or I don't know, maybe it's in a plasma table kind of application, something along those lines. Some different things you can do there. I'm not going to get into that at the moment. Maybe that's something for a later day. There we go. Our E-stop's connected. Next up, we're going to open this pack of materials here, and we're going to get the wire feed connected. There's a few different connections we need to make here. One of them is going to be to install the wire feed hose, which connects to the end of the welding gun. And then the other one is the electrical connections to actually power up the feeder. We'll start with the electrical connections, which is equally as simple because it has those plug and twist style connections. Makes it super easy to make all the connections. You can't mix it up. And once they're plugged in, since everything threads in together, they're really secure, so you can't knock them loose while you're working on something. Makes it really nice. On the back of the machine, there's also a little cover for the plug. I'm just going to pull that off. And then the plug, once we get it lined up, drops in and then threads in place, locked and secure. The other end is exactly the same, it's just a little bit smaller plug. And the connector to plug that in is sort of on the inside of the wire feed itself, right here. We're just going to connect that. Bam! To attach the wire feed, we have two different ends. The one with the nuts and washer, that's going to get attached to the welding gun in just a second. We need the other end, and that's what's going to attach right to the front here. We're just going to slip that end in, and then we'll turn this to the side. We can remove this little door, and there's a screw right here that we're going to tighten down to secure this tube in place. While we have this opened up, we want to go ahead and make sure we have our feed rollers installed correctly. There's 4 different wire sizes we can use. One thing that's cool about this little unit is that it has dual feed. Hopefully that will provide a little more reliable feed than something like my old worn out MIG welder. That's pretty cool. If you wanted to change these, they just have these little thumb screws here, and you can just pull the feed roller right off. This is where I was a little bit confused. I'm typically used to seeing welding wire marked as 025, 030, 024, those sorts of things. These are marked in 0.8 V. Now, I've never seen a designation of a V, so I wasn't really sure what that means. To the best of my knowledge and what I could find is V basically means millimeter. So you kind of have to do the math if you're not familiar with those types of measurements. It's really not that hard, and that converts over to your wire size, like an 030 or 035, that sort of thing. So this comes included with 0.8 V, 1.0 V, 1.2, and 1.6 feed rolls. Because I have the wire, I'm going to use the 0.8 V, which equates to about an 030 to the best of my knowledge. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me down below in the comments. With my feed rollers set correctly, and close this up. Now we're going to work on getting the wire feed connected to the welding gun. Just going to untangle this really quick. This is where the end of our wire feed, we're going to use these nuts and washers. We're going to end up having to adjust this. This does go into this little kind of swing arm here. Included are some little stamped wrenches, some tips, and some other pieces we're going to need here. This little hollow tube here is what we connect the tips to. Then we have a little collar here, and that allows us to slip this in place. And I don't have enough room to thread that collar on, so we're going to move this down a bit. We can tighten that collar down, which will secure this little rod, little hollow tube. Snug that down. And now we need to adjust the end. And this has a little groove in the end of the tip. We're just trying to set that right in that little groove, but of course not blocking the tip. We'll have to fine tune this here once we start running this. This little swing arm that holds the wire feed has a couple Allen screws where it pivots. I'm just going to snug those down so it's not moving out of the way. Not super tight, just enough so that this thing stays put. It's kind of cool looking, like some sort of space laser. One thing I like about this already, and I've not even welded with it yet, is how flexible these cables are. At least my MIG welder, and about every MIG welder I've ever used anyway, the cable's really stiff and kind of clunky. This, even the two together, seem really flexible. I kind of like that. Nothing worse than a big old clunky, awkward hose on a MIG welder. This is cool. I think we're ready to load some wire in this feeder. To do that, we have this little spring-loaded arm here. We just flip that out of the way. Then we can put our spool of wire on. There is a little pin here on the back that you want to line up with the notch in the back of your wire spool. And that just keeps everything from kind of rotating around, holds it all in place. Lock our spool back on. And now we can take the end of our wire. I've got it feeding off the bottom because then it feeds right into the wire feed here. This part really is no different than really any MIG welder. You just have to make sure you get it through both of the feed rollers. Now in the manual, at this step, it tells you to turn it on and run this through there. But I think we can save a little bit of time. Right here. Let's feed that through, at least a ways anyway. It says it could take up to 2 minutes if you use the machine. I think we can do that in about 10 seconds or so. There, we've come to a little bit of resistance, so I'm going to stop there. Well, that takes care of most of the connections. We still have this safety wire and stuff, but we'll get to that in a minute. Right now, we're at a point where we can power this up. The main power switch is right here on the back of the machine. Let's fire this up. It's making noise. We're going to take our little key here, little safety interlock key. We're going to insert that. That way we can turn that on. If we look over here at our wire feed, we've got a power light, which is a good thing. Let's go ahead and see if we can feed some wire. You can see the little laser dot here. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. We're going to press the wire feed button. If you need to make any adjustments to the feed rollers, tension-wise, it's just like every other welder I've ever used. You just turn these knobs, set the tension where you need them. There are some marks on here, which may or may not help you set the tension evenly. We'll go ahead and press the wire feed button, finish running that wire through the hose, and you can see how slow it turns, which is probably why they say it could take a couple of minutes to get that wire all the way fed through there. I've taken the little tip off for now so we can see what's going on here. Still have the wire feed button pressed. There we go. There's our wire. Put the tip back on. Now I'll connect what they're calling a safety clip, which, as far as I can tell, it's basically kind of your ground lead on other welders. Just has a banana plug here, plugs right in. And this will get connected to our piece that we're welding. I don't know why it's red, but it is. Maybe that's so you don't forget it. So I've got one more connection to make, and that is going to be the 6mm hose, which I mentioned earlier was included. This is connected to my tank of shielding gas. Now, if you read the instruction manual, it specifically says nitrogen, but if you look on their website, the website says you can use nitrogen, argon, or CO2. So you've got options. For now, I'm just using a standard argon mix for MIG welding, but in the future, I will look at getting the tank of nitrogen just so I can compare. I'm trying to use what I have right now. This just plugs into the back. You're going to need this shielding gas for all three operations, welding, cutting, and cleaning. And in fact, the machine won't even energize unless it sees sufficient pressure to that gas port. Now, to save on some of that expensive welding gas, you do have the capability of connecting regular shop compressed air to use for the cleaning and cutting tasks. And I don't think I'd use that for the welding. You definitely want that shielding gas, but that's a cool way to kind of save on some of that expensive welding gas. So at this point, we've got everything connected. Let's take a quick look at the screen, see if we need to configure anything, and then it's time to make some lasers, do some welding. So here's the main screen right after we powered it up. This is a touch screen. We can just click between whatever process we want, and that's a pretty responsive touch screen. I like that. So it looks like we're going to start with welding, and let's hit the confirm. That takes us to a different page here. Right off the bat, we've got some power settings here. I'm not changing any of that for the moment. I want to figure this out kind of as we go. We've got settings down here for the gas, for the wire feed, different settings, a lot of different things here. Looks like we can change the power frequency, all kinds of stuff here. I'm going to need to take some time and really understand this. For now, I just want to make a weld. So let's see what happens here. Okay, so when that's pressed, this is changed to tell us that the E-stop is on. So we'll make sure we take the E-stop off. And we also have a warning here for atmospheric pressure. That is because I don't have the gas turned on. I'm going to turn on the gas, and we should see that warning go away. All right, so we've seen that change. Now it says E-stop reset. One thing I am noticing is there's a lot of safety stops. We've got the emergency stop here. We've got this key switch that has to be on. Of course, we have the external stop, but one thing we haven't done yet is to start that. So that brings up a warning, wear your glasses. We're going to confirm. That should, there we go. You have to hit that twice. That should clear that out, I think. I guess I had to cycle the key. It's going to take me a minute to figure out the procedures for everything. So according to the screen, we are ready, I believe, to don our laser welding helmet and see if we can run a bead. Just remember, this is my first time trying to run a bead with a laser welder. This is going to take a little practice. I got a piece of sheet metal here to protect my workbench top and just a little scrap of metal here. I'm just going to play around, try to figure this out. I've got the clip attached to the workpiece, and let's pull the trigger and see what it does. Wow, that was pretty neat. But I noticed I have no wire feed. We need wire feed. Probably have a couple settings to work out here, but everything that I am seeing says that you let the wire push you, and I could feel the wire pushing it along, which is pretty cool. Just a little bit of discoloration on the back from the heat. Probably need to turn the heat up a little bit for this particular piece, but right now I'm just trying to get a feel for this thing. After making half a dozen test beads, let's see if we can stick two pieces of metal together. Well, that definitely tacked these two pieces together, but I've got some sort of retraction setting or something that I need to adjust to keep that wire from sticking. It could also be my technique as well. That's a pretty small tack. Look at that. Wow. So I've switched the welder to a continuous wire feed instead of the pulse that it was on. Let's see if that makes any difference here. I'm just going to try to hold it in place. There's a bead there, but I sort of missed. My angle was wrong. Let's try that again. That's a little better. There's a bead there. Look at that. That's a neat little bead. You can see a little bit of the discoloration there. Probably needs to be just a little bit hotter, but that tells me that it's penetrating. That weld's getting in there. All right, that's hot. We'll take a little closer look here at my test pieces. These were the first couple of welds. Was getting the wire sticking pretty bad, even over here. But these are some of the later ones after practicing for just a few minutes trying to get a feel for it. The wire didn't stick to any of that. I don't have it super hot yet. You can see a little bit of heat discoloration in a couple areas, which tells me we are getting there, but I'm only at about half power. Nice beads, actually quite easy to lay down a nice bead. Keep in mind as we're looking at these welds that this is the very first time I've ever run a laser welder. I don't have experience with this whatsoever, and I'm able to do beads that look this nice. I'm pretty impressed. Even though the welder operator, that would be me, has some learning to do, can we safely say that the X1 Laser Welder lays down nice welds and is pretty easy to operate? There's the proof. Yes, we can. Works really well. Now, let's move on and try the next function, which is cutting. We'll just go back to the mode, select cutting, confirm. A couple little tips and warning information there. We'll confirm. For our cutting test, I've removed the wire feed just to keep it out of the way. The other thing we need to do is to take this safety clip and attach it right to this section of the welding gun. That creates some sort of a circuit here. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but that's what we need to do. We're ready to cut. I've got a little scrap here of just some thin sheet metal. We're going to use that for our test and see what it does. Ooh, that was my fault. I slipped off there. All the smoke you're seeing is not coming directly from the machine. There's some paint on the back of this piece of sheet metal that it's burning off. How cool is that? We just cut that metal right off of there with lasers. Now there's probably a few settings I can tweak to get cleaner cuts, but we've barely adjusted anything and already we're up and running. So far, this is really fun. I really like the potential here. We've got one more function to test out, and that's cleaning. So let's change this over. To change it over, super easy. Mode selection brings up the main menu. Select cleaning, confirm. There it is. There's a lot of settings here we can change and adjust. I'm not going to do any of that at the moment. We're going to leave it right out of the box and see if we can clean some metal. We'll just use the back of this piece for right now, just as a test, and let's see what it does. Okay, you can see there, seems like it might be a little bit weak. I bumped up the power some. Let's see what it does now. So you can see where it's doing some stuff. Let me find a rustier piece and try this out. Let's try this, old rusty horseshoe rasp. Wow. That is cool. That is too cool. So far, we've proved that you can in fact weld metal, cut metal, and clean rusty and crusty metal. And that's pretty cool. But it's one thing to be using some scrap metal and just testing out some features. It's a whole different scenario to use a tool like this in real life. I've got a project that I think is a perfect example of a real-world use case for a machine just like this. We're going to be able to use the cutting, the cleaning, and welding functions to accomplish this little repair that I need to do. Not too long ago, I was getting my riding lawnmower cleaned up for the season, and I noticed a problem. Right here on the frame, there's a little bit of a crack, and of course you can see all the rust. Now at the time, I wasn't too concerned. I figured I'd take care of it in the springtime, but now that we have this laser welder to test out, I think this is gonna be a perfect repair because we can use the cleaning function to clean up the rust. We can then weld up the crack, and then we can cut a patch we can weld over top of the crack to reinforce it. Sound like a plan? Let's do it. Wow, that's a lot worse than I thought. That's okay, we will clean it up. We got our laser glasses for safety. The machine's set up to the clean function. Let's see what we can do. That is too cool. Well, that ended up being more than I anticipated. I initially thought it was really just going to be this crack and a little area here. I didn't realize it was going to be all of this, but got it all cleaned up, and that is super cool because honestly, this looks like it was just freshly sandblasted. I mean, look at that. How cool is that? Here's a spot we got to weld. Wow, that's cool. Fresh, clean metal. Like I said, looks like it was just freshly sandblasted. That is awesome. Now we'll just switch this over to welding mode. And you can see on the welding gun that I've already installed the wire feed. So we're ready now to weld up that crack. That is so cool. Now before I can cut out our little reinforcing patch, I need to swap this nozzle over to one that's intended for cutting. I realized when I did the first test, I didn't switch the nozzle, and that's probably why I got a little bit more of a ragged result. This nozzle is made specifically for cutting. So now we can go cut out our patch. It's not terrible. Cleaner than I got the first time around. Probably still need to tweak the settings a little bit, but that's fine. I'll just hold this patch in place for right now. We'll get it tacked, and then we'll tap it down flat with a hammer. I had a little bit of trouble getting this reinforcing patch tacked in place. Turns out I'd accidentally changed the setting and didn't quite realize it yet. After a few tries though, I was able to get it tacked on and I could tap it down flat with a hammer. I'm having a little bit of a tough time on this bottom side. Not sure if I need to use a different tip because of the angle. I'm getting it, but it's definitely not super pretty. I ended up getting this in place, but I had to use quite a few stitches instead of longer continuous welds. Like I already mentioned, this is due to operator error. I just didn't know it yet. Before I can paint this area, I wanted to sand it real quick just to smooth out the areas that I'd cleaned up. Shake well before using. After letting that paint dry overnight, I reinstalled this plastic footboard and our repair is complete. I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. Yes, you can see where I welded in that little patch, the little reinforcement piece, but I'm not too worried about that. It's a lawnmower. All I'm worried about is the fact that we've got that crack repaired and reinforced a bit, so I'm not worried about it coming back apart. So there you go, a real life use case for this X1 Pro Laser Welder from Xlaserlab worked perfectly. Let's head back into the shop and wrap this up. Well, there it is, the Xlaserlab X1 Pro Laser Welder. So far, this thing's handled everything we've thrown at it, from the first test cuts and welds to doing an actual real-life repair, fixing my lawnmower. One thing I didn't realize at first though, and it did give me some trouble, was that the welding gun itself has 3 different programmable presets. This allows you to switch between different material settings. And while that idea is super cool, I didn't realize it, and I was changing settings right in the middle of a weld, and that was giving me very inconsistent results. Once I figured that out though, I was very intentional to not press that button, change my settings mid-weld, and it made a huge difference. So just something to keep in mind. If you're running a machine like this, just make sure you're not changing those presets right in the middle of your work. I'd like to give a huge shout out to the team over at Xlaserlab for sending over this machine for me to try out. If you want to get some more information on this particular system, or maybe even pick one up for your own workshop, I'm going to put links down below in the video description. If you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you, let me know by leaving a comment down below. And as always, don't forget to hit that like button, hype the video, last of all, subscribe if for some strange reason you're not already subscribed. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Do you think you could strap one of these to a shark? Like on its head? You know what I'm saying?